Hi, I'm Thaddeus Wacknamara, and until recently, I was a political lobbyist, which I believe makes me exceptionally well qualified to talk about today's topic of conversation: cash. Right from the get-go, I just want to make sure that you understand today I'll be talking about actual money currency, not cryptocurrency. In the future, I will do a video about cryptocurrency, but for today, I'm talking about the figments of our imagination that we attribute value to that have a real, physical, available token associated with them. Plus, for those of you out there who are operating with more than half a clue, you'll notice that the pictures left and right of me right now are basically the same. So let's talk about currency, where it came from, and why it's used. Originally, people used to carry around bushels of barley and sheep on their shoulders from town to town and tried to trade that way. This became extremely inconvenient and was deemed inefficient because sheep can walk and the bushels of barley could be represented with other small items. Shells, feathers, whale teeth, and small rocks became indicators of another object, being a four-legged furry thing or a large sack of grain that could be turned into beer. However, I've also noticed that even now, many years later, if you've got a large enough rock and hold it like this, you can absolutely still use that in order to gain goods and services from people. As time went on and trade became widespread, people noticed that you could go to your local beach and collect your own shells. Whale teeth were not exactly hard to come by for most of the population, though today it's pretty much one Scandinavian country in Japan that generally make them, as well as the fact that trading a feather for the whole fucking chicken wasn't exactly a sensible life choice. So the basic idea behind coins is that they were made from a metal which had a rarity and a tradable value to them. So you take a lump of that metal, get it nice and soft, and hit it with a fucking hammer. Therefore it was easier to carry. If that hammer was imprinted with the face of someone whom had managed to kill his way to the top of the stack, it was worth significantly more and represented some form of authority. What was most interesting about these coins is that you could easily make them out of a cheaper metal or shave pieces off of them. There's a lot of examples of very collectible coins out there that have been clipped or shaved down. In fact, one of the favourite methods for shaving them back in the day was to take a whole sack of the coins, put in some heavier rocks, because most precious metals tend to be soft, and just really shake that bag of rocks. Eventually, what became a problem was that you could accumulate enough of these coins that holding a stack of them over your shoulder, again, precious metals tend to be heavy, was really inconvenient. And unlike little woolly idiots that you can make walk in a very large group together in a straight line by just having a yapping dog behind them, coins aren't easy to transport. So we ended up coming up with the idea of paper money. That brings us on to the concept of a banknote or a promissory note or a credit note. And thus brings us to the conclusion of my terrible and manic explanation of where currency came from and where we roughly have arrived at today, in that we have paper money and we have coin money. We also have ledger money, which is basically made up numbers that are written down in a spreadsheet, but we're not going to get into that one either, because that'd be more of a conversation around banking. But Thad, you might ask, where's the science and technology angle to all this money talk? And I say, fuck you. If you don't know the amount of mind-blowing science and technology and innovation that went into making these slippery fucking beer tickets, it's time to sit down and pull out some ones, because I'm about to jiggle the socks right out of your fucking jocks. So as soon as something has value, people want their own version of it, or many of them. In the case of currency, the early problem was that people were making fakes, long and short, just absolutely knocking it off. This was less of an issue with coins, which I'll get into after, but in terms of banknotes, it's made from paper and has writing on it, more or less. So at one point in time, just before the Civil War in the US, I believe that it was around 20 to 30%, don't quote me on that, US banknotes were complete bullshit. And even today, the US $100 note is the most counterfeited note in the world. It literally underpins global trade. We send pallets of it to, look, let's just say we send pallets of it everywhere. And at the same time, it is a relatively secure note. And this is where the technology really starts to play out. Inside the paper are micro threads of different colors of polymer. The printing itself is done using extraordinarily expensive and very specialized digital offset printers, which you can buy, but it's going to get you on a watch list faster than a truckload of nitrogen fertilizer, and it is done using extraordinarily specialized inks. If you draw on some of these banknotes using a traditional pen, instead of coming out the normal color you'd expect, it actually goes yellow, which you'd think was a very, very, very expensive trick to do. But some dude worked out that actually if you take phone book paper, which, totally rare stuff since we totally use all those phone books these days. Anyway, you take phone book paper and you put two of them together, it essentially feels like and will operate like that particular currency paper. It doesn't have little micro threads in it, but who cares? Nobody's looking that hard. It also did have a security strip in it, which he was also able to replicate, but that did take a lot more work, and props for putting a security strip in there. It's a very good idea. And it had a transparent window. The transparent windows are often a stickling point, except for the fact that you can get that particular type of plastic in printable sheets from your local office works. For a while there were a whole bunch of dickhead kids who thought it was a good idea to actually bleach low-value US currency notes and then use a medium-quality laser printer to print a much higher value on them. Funny times, but is not going to stand up to any form of scrutiny. The real forgery comes in when you start looking at very, very experienced people doing very, very large runs, or alternatively, foreign states who know how much of the world is pegged to the $100 bill. But one thing that Australia actually did do really, really well was the CSIRO came up with a poly something urethane ethylene poly. What he said, banknote, which not only contains microprinting and is made of amazing plastic, it also has a window which is embossed in a micro format and viewable from both sides, as well as a number of different other security features. When we also sold this to Canada, they encrypted the serial numbers as well. Actually, some of these even have, much like the US note, a UV responsive aspect to them. Now, I happen to have just over here a relatively high power UV light. Let's see if this is one of them. Nope, just eye cancer. As demonstrated earlier, coins were also susceptible to forgery, people clipping them or shaving them in order to take precious metals from them, then they minted new coins out of them. Any strike you could make could also therefore be sandcast and you could pour a new coin. So some of the security features that built into coins that you may not know about include the fact that alloys of very, very specific quantities are used instead of the raw precious metal. They are weird combinations of nickel and copper or gold and silver that have very specific chemical properties, but also weight conditions. So next time you're at the pokies and they're pouring them all in, you're going, geez, how do they work that out? It's because you cannot easily get exactly the right weight for those coins out of pretty much any other combination of metals unless you're an absolute fucking genius. And if you're that much of a metallurgical genius, there's probably not a lot of money in ripping off $1 coins, especially not Australian ones at the moment. At times, the materials used to make the coins have been more valuable than the coins themselves. There are peaks in the copper, and I think it was silver or nickel prices over the years that have led to people taking buckets of money down to the local metal recyclers to literally be melted down rather than spending it. A notable coin was released fairly recently in Australia by our Australian Signal Directorate, a bunch of spooks. They like to think of themselves as the Australian CIA, but they wouldn't say that out loud. And they produced this particular gem of a coin, which was our very own legal tender cicada, whatever it was, puzzle, in a coin. It had several cryptographic puzzles built into it, and it was so tip-top that it took only a few days for a 14-year-old boy to solve them. That's actually not entirely true either. Because of the work of the Australian government, it was required that the legislation around the coin actually explain the vast majority of the puzzles 11 days before it was actually released. This pretty much means that the 14-year-old was a bit of a soft prick, and look, honestly, it's all a little bit disappointing. But why would you do something like this? The idea is to raise the profile of the Australian Signal Directorate. That's right. ASD decided it was a good idea to raise the profile of what's essentially a fucking spy organisation. Now, as much as I'd like to say that the governments out there in the world are absolutely leading the race in creating non-forgeable and completely safe and confidence-bringing tokens in order to show you what money you have and what your current value is, I have to say that there is one group of people who are much better at showing you what you've actually got on the table, and that is the casinos. If you look at one of these little bastards under a microscope very, very carefully, they are extraordinarily intricate things. Now, I'm not talking about your cruise ship fun money. I'm talking about the big casinos out there. Some of the larger casinos out there have millions and millions and millions of dollars sunk into just making sure that your plastic fun ticket is absolutely legitimate. And they're better at detecting counterfeits than a lot of the government agencies out there, if rumours are to be believed. Or I might be lying because it makes for good drama. Now, currency is on the decline in a lot of the more affluent Western countries, and a lot of people with their very interesting ideas of how things work think that this is because of the fact that using a card and a digitally traceable method of transferring money around makes them a lot more easy to track. The reality behind it is that getting somebody in an armored car with a gun to run around carrying bags of coins is really, really inefficient. Just like we were talking about at the start. And if you don't have a certain saturation of people using money, then it becomes unaffordable to have people running around with that money and their guns. One thing we can be certain of is that no matter how hard anyone tries, there is no time in the foreseeable future that actual physical currency is going to go away. There will always be a workaround for it. I mean, great big jugs of washing detergent are used as currency in some places where actual money isn't as easily available. And postage stamps and other similar tradable commodities have been used in plenty of environments where there is no ability to trade in actual cash. There will always be some form of fiat token that you'll be able to trade for goods and services. My favourite comedy skit ever happened to be about currency. It's called Arse Pennies, and it was done by Upright Citizens Brigade. With Amy Poehler. Now, she's obviously done a lot better than her colleagues from that particular 1998 comedy production, quite possibly because she wasn't involved in a skit about putting small coins up your arse to increase your confidence. The Australian $2 coin, which is heavily circulated, is very small. Very, very small. and I'm very, very confident. I'm Thaddeus McNamara, and I'm whacking odd.